Emma and Daniel Foster had been married for just 7 days when they landed in Toronto for their long-awaited honeymoon. The city was blanketed in snow, its streets glowing under the dim orange of street lamps. The air was icy, the kind of cold that made every breath look like smoke. To Emma, Toronto looked magical. Frozen lakes, decorated holiday markets, and the romantic charm of a winter city. For Daniel, however, there was a strange tension in his eyes, a quiet unease he didn't share with her. The couple checked into a luxurious lakeside hotel, one of those tall glass towers overlooking the frozen harbor. From their window, Emma could see the jagged cracks forming in the ice below, like veins spreading across the surface of a frozen mirror. She was captivated, whispering that it felt like they had stepped into a fairy tale. Yet, Daniel seemed distracted, staring at the ice with an expression Emma couldn't quite read. It was as though the frozen water held his thoughts captive. Over the next 2 days, the newlyweds explored the city. They strolled hand in hand through snow-dusted streets, tried steaming cups of hot chocolate in small cafes, and visited Toronto's famous ice sculptures, glittering under blue and purple lights. Emma was radiant, her red scarf wrapped tightly around her as she snapped pictures of everything. Daniel smiled for the camera, but locals later recalled something unsettling about him. His smiles never reached his eyes, and often, while Emma admired the sights, Daniel was watching her more closely than anything else. Hotel staff noticed the contrast too. Emma's laughter echoed through the lobby, light and carefree, while Daniel always trailed a few steps behind, quiet, watchful, almost possessive. One employee even whispered later that she had seen Emma flinch when Daniel gripped her wrist a little too tightly near the elevators. At the time, no one thought much of it. After all, couples fight, and newlyweds often adjust to each other's flaws. But in hindsight, those tiny details began to look like shadows before the storm. On the third night, snow fell heavier than before, coating the city in a ghostly silence. Emma wanted to see the harbor lights reflected on the ice, calling it the most romantic part of Toronto. She begged Daniel to join her for a late-night walk. They bundled up and headed out, the hotel cameras catching their final moments together. Emma was smiling, pulling her red scarf higher against the wind, while Daniel walked beside her, unreadable, his eyes fixed on the frozen darkness ahead. That night would mark the beginning of a mystery no one could ever fully explain. The hotel's security footage became the most crucial piece of evidence in Emma's disappearance. At exactly 10:47 p.m., Emma and Daniel were recorded stepping out of the elevator and crossing the lobby. Emma wore her bright red scarf, the same one she had worn in nearly every photo of their trip, a vivid splash of color against the pale, icy world outside. She was laughing, clutching Daniel's arm, her cheeks flushed from wine and the cold. To anyone watching, she seemed blissfully unaware that this would be the last time she would ever be seen alive. The couple exited through the revolving doors, snow blowing in through the gaps as they pushed their way outside. Witnesses later said they saw Emma tilt her head back, catching snowflakes on her tongue like a child. Daniel, however, didn't share her playful mood. One valet remembered the way he tightened his coat, his eyes darting toward the harbor, as if something out there was waiting for him. Emma tugged him forward, pulling him toward the direction of the lake, her laughter echoing faintly as they disappeared into the night. Strangely, no further cameras picked them up. The streets near the harbor were covered in a thick layer of snow, and most businesses had closed early because of the worsening storm. Police later noted that if the couple had indeed walked along the waterfront, the swirling snow would have erased their footprints within minutes. It was as though Emma and Daniel had stepped out of sight and simply vanished into the frozen dark. When Daniel returned to the hotel alone hours later, the night manager noticed the absence immediately. Emma had been the more vibrant of the two, always chatting, always smiling, and her presence was hard to miss. Daniel appeared distant, his clothes damp from snow, his face pale. When asked where Emma was, he answered casually. She had gone out for an early morning walk by herself, he claimed. His words seemed odd. The manager later recalled the storm outside, the sub-zero cold, and the fact that Emma never returned without checking back in at the front desk. The following morning, her absence became impossible to ignore. She didn't show up for breakfast, she didn't call her family back home, and no one saw her leave the hotel again. The red scarf she was last seen wearing was nowhere to be found, and her belongings were untouched in the room. Passport, wallet, even her phone still charging on the nightstand. It was as if Emma Foster had walked out into the winter night and been swallowed whole by Toronto's icy silence. By the afternoon of Emma's disappearance, panic had already begun to spread through the hotel. Daniel finally went to the front desk, his voice calm but oddly detached, reporting that his wife hadn't returned from her morning walk. Within hours, The Toronto police were contacted, and the case of a missing newlade quickly drew attention. Flyers with Emma's smiling face, the same picture from their wedding, her red scarf tied neatly around her neck, were distributed across the city. To most, she looked like the perfect bride, full of life, too vibrant to simply vanish. Police units searched the frozen harbor first, since that was where Emma was last seen heading. Officers trudged through knee-deep snow, shining flashlights across the icy waters and along the deserted walkways. Divers were put on standby, though the ice was too thick to risk sending them in immediately. A sense of dread hung over the investigation. It was one of the coldest winters in years, and survival outside for more than a few hours was nearly impossible. Still, no gloves, no hat, no red scarf, nothing belonging to Emma was found. Volunteers from the community joined in, forming search parties that combed through nearby parks, alleyways and frozen pathways. The silence of the storm made everything feel eerie. Each call of Emma's name echoed into the emptiness with no response. Snow-muffled footsteps, erased trails, and left behind a blank white canvas, as though the city itself was determined to hide whatever had happened. Some searchers swore they saw shapes moving in the distance, shadows flitting across the ice, but when approached, nothing was ever there. Daniel became the center of attention during the search, though not in the way one might expect. While many families of the missing clung to hope and begged strangers for help, Daniel kept a strange composure. He answered questions, nodded politely, but rarely showed the kind of desperation others expected from a husband whose wife had disappeared into a frozen city. When police asked him to describe Emma's last words, he hesitated too long, finally muttering something vague about her wanting fresh air. Detectives quietly noted his coldness, though officially, he remained just a grieving spouse. As days passed, the city seemed to swallow Emma's trail completely. Not a single footprint was linked to her. Not a single witness saw her walking alone after leaving with Daniel. It was as if she had stepped into a void the moment they reached the waterfront. The mystery grew darker with each passing hour, and whispers began circulating through Toronto. Whispers of the harbor ice and the legends that claimed it sometimes kept those it touched, holding them beneath the surface, never to be seen again. On the third morning of Emma's disappearance, when hope was already beginning to fade, a jogger passing by Toronto's frozen harbor noticed something strange glinting beneath the ice. At first, he thought it was just a piece of fabric caught in the cracks, but as he knelt closer, he realized it was bright red, a scarf, tangled beneath the surface. His stomach tightened when he remembered the missing woman from the news. Within minutes, police swarmed the scene, their flashing lights casting eerie reflections across the snow-covered water. The ice was dangerously thin in that section of the harbor, but rescue divers were called in despite the bitter cold. Crowds gathered at a distance, their breath forming clouds in the frigid air, as they watched the men in heavy suits break through the frozen layer. The sound of axes striking ice echoed through the harbor, sharp and haunting, until finally a hole large enough was carved open. When the divers descended, the water swallowed them completely, leaving only the silence of anticipation above. What they pulled out moments later sent chills through every onlooker. It was Emma. Her body was suspended just beneath the ice, perfectly preserved by the cold, her face tilted upward as though staring at the world above. The divers described her expression as almost frozen in a scream, lips slightly parted, eyes wide with something between fear and disbelief. The strangest part, however, wasn't just the condition of her body. It was how it had gotten there. The ice above her was still solid, showing no sign of having been broken from the outside. Investigators were baffled. Normally, if someone had fallen through, there would be jagged edges, cracks radiating outward, evidence of struggle. But in Emma's case, the surface was smooth, untouched, except for the small cracks where her scarf had snagged. It was as though she had been placed beneath the ice deliberately, sealed in a frozen coffin. Rumors spread quickly through the city, whispers of something unnatural, something impossible. The police tried to keep details quiet, but the bizarre discovery made its way into the headlines by the next morning. For Emma's family, the discovery brought no relief, only more questions. How had she ended up there without leaving any trace on the surface? Why had no one heard screams, splashes, or calls for help on that silent, snowy night? And why did her face, captured in photos taken by divers, look less like someone who had drowned, and more like someone who had seen something terrifying in her final moments? Toronto had answers to none of these questions, only the haunting image of a bride, forever trapped beneath the ice. In the days following Emma's discovery, the focus of the investigation shifted sharply toward Daniel. Detectives questioned him relentlessly, piecing together the timeline of their final night together. His story remained the same. Emma had wanted to take a walk alone by the harbor, and he had returned to the hotel, waiting for her. But the problem with his explanation was simple. Nobody ever saw Emma walking alone. Every camera, every witness, and every detail pointed to one thing. Daniel had been the last person seen with her. The police dug deeper into Daniel's life back home, and the perfect image of a loving husband began to fracture. Friends described him as charming in public, but privately, he was controlling. Emma's closest confidants admitted she had once confessed to feeling suffocated by him. He kept track of her texts, her calls, even her social media posts. A bridesmaid revealed that, just a week before the wedding, Emma had expressed doubts, not about the marriage itself, but about Daniel's growing possessiveness. It painted a disturbing picture, one that aligned too well with the silence of his grief. Even in Toronto, Daniel's behavior raised eyebrows. While search parties calmed the snow, he rarely joined them. Instead, he sat quietly in the warmth of the hotel lounge, sipping coffee, giving short, detached answers to police. Reporters swarmed the story, and Daniel became an unwilling spectacle. Cameras caught him leaving the hotel in the middle of the night, wandering toward the harbor, staring out at the frozen water as though expecting someone, or something, to emerge from beneath. Each time, he returned pale and shaken, offering no explanation. Detectives also found inconsistencies in his account. Why had he waited until the next afternoon to report Emma missing, if she had supposedly gone out early in the morning? Why had he lied about her taking her phone, when it was found plugged in by the hotel bed? Small details like these piled up, making it harder for him to appear innocent. The red scarf, too, became a focal point. Daniel had originally told police she wasn't wearing it that night, yet the scarf was found tangled beneath the ice with her body. Was he lying, or was there something he wasn't willing to admit? Public opinion quickly turned against him. The once celebrated groom was now whispered about as a potential murderer. His face splashed across newspapers with captions like, "Did the husband know more than he said?" Locals whispered that Daniel's icy demeanor matched too perfectly with the frozen fate of his wife. Yet, without concrete evidence linking him to Emma's death, suspicion alone wasn't enough. He was left walking free, a man under a cloud of growing darkness, his every move watched, his every word dissected. And still, no one could answer the most chilling question of all. How had Emma ended up beneath the ice without breaking through it? When Emma's body was brought to the coroner's office, investigators hoped the autopsy would finally provide clarity. Instead, it only deepened the mystery. The first shocking revelation was that her lungs contained no water at all. Emma had not drowned. Despite being found trapped beneath the ice, her death certificate listed hypothermia as the cause, but even that conclusion carried unsettling anomalies. The medical examiner noted strange frost, like patterns across her skin, almost like delicate white veins branching under the surface, markings they had never seen before. What unsettled the pathologists further was the condition of her body. Emma appeared to have been exposed to extreme cold for a much longer time than the night she vanished. Her tissues suggested prolonged freezing, as though she had been encased in ice for days. Yet she was seen alive and laughing on security footage, just hours before she disappeared. The timeline didn't match. How could a healthy young woman, missing for less than 48 hours, show signs of being preserved in ice far beyond that window? There were other small but disturbing details. Emma's hands were clenched tightly, as though gripping something invisible. Her eyes, when examined under magnification, showed crystallized patterns, like frost trapped within the corneas. The examiner admitted in a press conference that these were unusual environmental effects caused by extreme cold, but privately, staff whispered that it was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Some even speculated she hadn't simply frozen to death, but that she had been claimed by the ice in a way science couldn't yet explain. Detectives, desperate for answers, asked the examiner whether it was possible Emma had been placed beneath the ice after her death. But this theory only made things stranger. If she had been killed elsewhere and then hidden, the divers should have found evidence of disturbance in the ice layers. But none existed. The harbor's frozen surface was unbroken, untouched, save for the cracks her scarf had been caught in. It was as if Emma had materialized beneath the ice without ever breaking through it, leaving experts with no logical explanation. The final report was inconclusive. Officially, her death was listed as hypothermia with unusual environmental factors. But privately, officers admitted the case felt less like a crime and more like something unnatural. The whispers about the ice veil, the cursed stretch of harbor that had claimed lives before, began to grow louder. Locals said Emma wasn't the first to vanish near those waters, and she wouldn't be the last. Her body, preserved in perfect stillness, became a chilling reminder that sometimes the cold doesn't just kill. Sometimes, it keeps what it takes. With the autopsy offering no solid answers, the case drifted into a haze of speculation and fear. Detectives exhausted every possible lead, but nothing explained how Emma's body had ended up beneath solid ice without any sign of entry. The city, once captivated by the tragic love story of the newlyweds, now whispered of darker forces at play. It was as if Emma had been swallowed by something ancient and silent, something that lived beneath the harbor's frozen skin. Daniel, meanwhile, grew increasingly reclusive. Though he was never charged, he couldn't escape the shadow of suspicion. Residents spotted him wandering near the harbor late at night, staring across the icy expanse, lips moving as though speaking to someone unseen. One fisherman swore he saw Daniel kneeling at the edge of the water, whispering Emma's name before breaking into muffled sobs. Others insisted he looked less like a grieving husband, and more like a man haunted, not by guilt, but by something that refused to let him go. Whispers of the ice veil legend resurfaced with frightening intensity. Older locals recalled stories of people vanishing near the harbor during particularly brutal winters. Some claimed the ice held a hunger, a pull that lured souls beneath its surface. Folklore described figures preserved in the depths, faces pressed against the frozen walls as though trying to escape. Now, with Emma's death mirroring these chilling tales, many believed the curse had claimed another victim. Rational explanations faded quickly in the face of fear and superstition. Police attempted to quiet the rumors, but the public's fascination grew stronger. Visitors came to the harbor, some leaving flowers, others leaving candles, all staring at the spot where Emma had been found. Late at night, a few claimed they saw a faint figure beneath the surface when the moonlight hit the ice. A woman in a red scarf, her face pale and unblinking, watching. Most dismissed it as imagination, tricks of light and shadow on cracked ice. Yet, the stories spread, fueling the sense that Emma had never truly left. Eventually, Daniel disappeared from Toronto altogether. He sold his belongings, quit his job, and vanished from public life as quickly as his wife had vanished from the snow. But the harbor did not forget. Locals still say that on nights when the ice begins to shift and groan, you can hear the faint sound of a woman's laugh carried on the wind, light, carefree, echoing against the frozen silence. Whether it belongs to Emma, or to something far older lurking beneath the ice, no one dares to say aloud. And so, Emma's case remains one of Toronto's most haunting mysteries. A young bride, full of life and love, gone in the blink of an eye, only to be found frozen beneath untouched ice, her final expression locked in terror. Was Daniel hiding a terrible secret, or was something far darker at work? Something beyond human understanding, something that waits in the frozen silence of the harbor. To this day, no one knows the truth. Her death was never solved, the questions never answered, and the ice keeps its secrets well. But locals warn, if you ever find yourself near Toronto's harbor on a winter night, listen closely. You may hear the faint echo of footsteps on the frozen surface, and see a shadow in a red scarf staring back at you from beneath the ice. Because sometimes the cold doesn't just kill. Sometimes, it keeps what it takes.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share it with your friends, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Most importantly, subscribe and hit the bell icon so the next secret finds you first.